The Fearless Podcast, in a time of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. All right, y'all. Welcome back to the Fearless Podcast. We are at episode 38. And once again, I have an awesome guest that I want to introduce y'all to. And it's Homesteading with PJ, and his video popped up in my feed about carnivore, which I was like, oh, check that out. So it was very interesting. So I reached out to PJ. Let's bring PJ on. Hey, PJ, how you doing, man?
Good. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Thanks for taking the time. We appreciate it. So, so your video popped up in my feed. I think it's like something like 100 Days Carnivore, and I'm overly fascinated with this tidal wave. You know, this carnivore tidal wave is almost as big as Joel Salatin's homesteading tsunami. So I think these two trends are merging a little bit, because we have a lot of friends that are going carnivore. We've been carnivore 230 plus days as a family, and we've been finding a lot of benefits with it. So there was a lot of overlap here. So I wanted to reach out to you. One, I saw your homesteading there in North Carolina, and so I want to kind of see what that origin story is all about, like why homesteading and why you're at where you're at, and get to learn a little bit about your origin story, and then maybe bleed into this carnivore thing and talk about all that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So homesteading's always been an interest of mine. I grew up in Southern California, where there are 0 homesteads in Orange County, California.
Right.
I could be wrong. Maybe there's a handful of weirdos out there, but like I was one of the weirdos that thought, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we grew our own food? So even as a kid, was interested in anytime we'd go to like the plant nursery, I'd be like, oh, let's buy some corn or watermelon and like try to grow stuff. And I've never had a green thumb. I still don't. But like even as a young teenager, just trying to do a little vegetable garden, I remember I wrote my parents a petition for like let me have laying hens and stuff, which never ended up and I learned about like bantam chickens. I was like, they're little, the eggs are cute, and like it never panned out. I never had chickens growing up. I did one day. I found this place that sells like rabbits and ducklings around Easter time, and I actually bought a duckling, and I kept a duck in secret from my family for that didn't last. It wasn't a secret very long, but luckily the duck was so cute they were okay with it. But I did have a pet duck for my last few months of high school.
So this is kind of like been a kind of like a lifetime dream, this whole homesteading thing.
A little bit, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's great.
And luckily, when I was dating, who's now my wife, Natalie, she one of our first dates, I learned that she, um, also against her HOA, I guess, kept bantam chickens in secret and so we just immediately connected, like we both had that kind of like underground poultry connection.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think we both had each other like hook, line, and sinker, and we and luckily we shared that dream, which is, I mean, as you know, like it's a team sport. You can't do it alone.
Yeah.
Um, and you absolutely can't do it if your spouse isn't into it. So anyway, so we still had some school to by the time we got married. So we had some school. We started our small family and life in Utah. Ended up finding a place at around 2019, and it was about an acre and a quarter, and it was horse property. And so I was lucky enough to um, for I don't even know how I got into it. I just got interested in sheep. I just love the idea of ruminants, and just like the superpower that they have on healing land and regenerative agriculture. Obviously, an acre and a quarter is not big enough to do cows. I was never interested in goats, and so sheep, just by process of elimination, became something I was very interested in. So on our 1 acre and 1/4 property in the middle of suburbia. We bought a trio of sheep, 2 ewes and a ram, and you know how it goes. A couple of years later, you've got many more sheep, and we just kind of looked at ourselves one day and said, "Geez, couldn't we do this for real?" Um, and I had a job opportunity that let me go totally remote, wherever I wanted in the country, and we were left with this kind of nationwide property search, which is not as it sounds fun to think you can move anywhere in the country, but narrowing it
Mm,
down to the whole
sure.
country is pretty darn hard. Um,
Yeah.
we had like 7 finalist states, and it was like, how do we even like how do we do this? But
Okay, lay it on me. Who were the 7 prospects and why?
Oh boy. So we kind of bundle them into regions. So Northwest, we're looking at Oregon and Washington, mostly just because trees and rain is pretty up
Mhm,
there. I'm not actually that well traveled in the U.S., so a lot of this is maybe more stereotype than reality.
sure.
Texas, Oklahoma are good sheep and cattle country.
Mhm.
Montana was another option for, again, sheep and cattle reasons. Uh, New England, I think, would be really, really cool. I mean, it has a renowned like small farm scene, which when you think about the origins of our country, it makes sense why there's a lot of small farms there, right? Um, and then Southeast was interesting, and I started noticing. I'm going to sound super basic here, but I started noticing a lot of YouTube homesteaders were based out of North Carolina,
Mhm.
and never on my radar, not even a little bit. Um, and one of the things I started noticing is kind of similar to the Northeast. In North Carolina, there was a lot more of these. There were still small farms. It was still very agricultural centered, but not quote unquote big ag yet.
Sure.
A lot of farms kind of in the ballpark range of like 20 to 100 acre kind of farms. And that was really intriguing. Also, there's a great local food movement, and some really good farmers markets. And like a weirdo, we bought a house sight unseen because this would have been 2021, which
Wow.
the market was nuts, right? We had to buy it sight
Mhm.
unseen, pay way over asking price. But we, I'd never even been in the state. I'd never set foot in the state of North Carolina. Bought the house, looked at the house one day before closing, and yeah, I see your face right
Wow.
now,
That's
like a crazy
hardcore.
person, right? Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
definitely crazy.
yeah.
So,
I'll
but you didn't die. You're still alive, so
still,
that's cool.
I,
Isn't that
I will say
crazy?
the craziest thing, and I've made loads of mistakes. Probably my biggest, yes, my biggest homesteading mistake was bringing my sheep with me. So I didn't move them. I paid somebody a couple $1,000s to move them, because when you only have half a dozen animals and most of them are ewes, you do
Mhm.
that thing where you name them and your
Yep.
kids name them. And like
Okay.
we've been comfortable eating. Like it's not, for some reason it's not a big deal when a ram is born, and you know it's not going to be a stud ram. He's not going to be around forever. We just name all of our rams Sean. It's Sean the sheep.
Mhm.
We know that they're all going to get in the freezer one day. And it's not a big deal. But the ewes, for some reason, is a big deal. So my favorite ewes and my favorite stud, we paid somebody, and I was going to start my flock over. Big mistake, because a little geography lesson. Utah and North Carolina, very, very different climates.
Mhm.
Utah's the second driest state in the nation. North Carolina, I don't know how wet it is, but it's pretty darn wet.
Incredibly wet. Yeah.
Yeah, state. And you've raised sheep, and so parasites are,
Yep.
next to predators. Which, knock on wood, I've never had a coyote or a neighbor's dog take out a sheep, but I've had a lot of parasite issues out here. And within about 18 months, I think it was about half of that flock, due
Oh.
to barber poleworm, we lost.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I'm no expert. I try really hard, but I mean, it was every 7 days during the summer, rotating them, electric fence, just doing everything. And it got to the point, I kind of lived in this like fantasy world where I thought I would never, like, I will never deworm my sheep. And
We've
then
been there.
and then you do it, and they still were dropping, and it was just like, and it was such a hard decision, but I decided I just need to start over. I found someone with a bigger operation, more land at least, who was willing to take all my ewes. We struck a fair deal, and my neighbor wanted my sheep, my rams, and they're good rams, and he still has them, and he's crossing them with St. Croix, which are
Oh, yep.
smaller but much more parasite resistant. These were Dorper sheep, by the way,
Dorpers.
that I.
Okay, so Dorper St. Croix cross. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, which I'm super excited to see his lambs. And now I just finish out rams. I buy young rams when they're weaned, and so right now
Okay.
I've got 5 Katahdin rams, and they probably have 1 or 2 months left before they go to freezer camp. But I got to tell
You
you,
just
man, that
graze
was
them
a.
out.
I did, yeah, just raise them out. But I
Yep.
gotta say, if I were to do anything over, have the luxury of doing anything over, it would be just start over. I loved those sheep, but I tell you, it would have been much easier to just say goodbye and sell them to someone who knows what they're doing than bring them over here and watch them all, pass due to barber polworm. When I was just pulling my hair out trying to figure out what else can I do for these sheep.
Right, versus having sheep that were already, regionally accustomed to the climate and the rain and the wetness. If you have some animal that's already acclimated to that region, you're going to have a lot less issues and problems. So, okay, so you pack up everything in the middle of this like crazy real estate. You overpay. You buy this house that you've never stepped foot in. How many acres did you end up getting?
It's about 12 acres.
So you got 12 acres. Okay, so you got a great chunk of land, a single family on 12 acres. You could pretty much do whatever you want. Now, when you buy a property sight unseen on the opposite side of the country, on the opposite coast, what did you have any of these like, oh yeah, it was great, except it needed an entire new HVAC system and a new septic system and a new roof. And did you have any of those really cool surprises of like buying a property sight unseen?
Luckily, we had been through that at our last purchase of the HVAC system. Exact same thing happened at our last purchase. So we tried really hard to avoid that. Luckily, HVAC is great here. It was funny. The on like Redfin or Zillow, the house was like built in the 70s, but as we learned more of the story, it was built in town and then somehow stripped to the studs and like brought on a trailer and plunked out here. So the only thing from the 70s is the 2x4s in the walls. Like everything
Oh,
else was about 2 years old. Yeah. So the house, nothing, like nothing wrong with it. Septic system, the guy before us built a piece of our driveway that like a concrete pad, and the septic runs under that. So
oh,
obviously that collapsed, and we
mhm.
didn't know that. But say la vie, it's we got that fixed and no other issues since. So house wise, pretty good.
Yeah.
Um, and then the land was all brambles. I mean, we've got a long easement road that goes to our house, just pine and bramble. So a lot of clearing, a lot of land that we had to clear, um, and put up fences. But other than that, man, it's been a dream. It's
Man,
been
that's
very
great.
idyllic.
So you didn't find any dumping, because like on our property is incredible, man. We found so much trash. Like, you start walking it, and as it rains
Yes.
and rains, we found just like decades of trash on our
What's some
property.
of the funnest stuff you've found? Like the most interesting? Like I found a calculator once, and I thought that was so random. But like, what have you found?
Everything, like just uh vintage clothing, old glass bottles, but like literally, I mean, when I say that they were dumping, I mean that they were literally dumping just like
Mm.
bags of trash. And like a lot of this stuff you could tell was like from the 70s. So this had been like generational, just oh well, we'll just throw the trash in the woods where nobody can see it, I guess. And so out of sight, out of mind. I
Oh,
don't know.
it's frustrating. I
It's
I've got a friend who he's the guy who cleared our land. He's got a really great machine that just mulches everything.
yeah,
He
cool.
told me the craziest thing he's found is an entire boat that someone had no idea was like in the brambles in his soon to be pasture. Just a boat there.
Yeah,
Crazy.
we bought one of the properties we bought. Um, we were able to sell it and buy a different piece of property. But yeah, that was 20 acres and we start walking it and we found like multiple cars. We
No
found a
way.
couple boats. Yeah, all abandoned. It was
No way.
yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my gosh.
That's really common down here. It's kind
That's
of wild.
unfortunate. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it's kind of fascinating, but it kind of speaks to like that mentality. Well, just like there's a lot of people down here that will literally just burn all their trash.
Sure.
They'll like plastic and everything. Oh yeah, put it in the burn barrel, and I'm just like, bro, we're gonna breathe that for the rest of our life. Thanks, man. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and
Man.
but the cool thing about getting this property and then getting all the trash off of it and starting to bring in the mulch and bring in the animals, the really neat thing is that we can take this forsaken property that was literally like a dump, like a neighborhood dump apparently, and just
Mhm.
kind of bring it back, make it serviceable, make it regenerative, and so that's neat. So okay, so you guys move all the way across the country, 2021. Yeah, overpay. And so now you're in North Carolina. So any regrets? I mean, you kind of were blessed with the fact that there was no major like economic issues with the purchase or any of these cataclysmic failures that can bankrupt some people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I got to say, even though we did, probably by North Carolina standards, overpay for the property, like what we sold in Utah, I mean, we did well, and I was happy to overpay, just for the value of it. Um, and yeah, the macroeconomics of real estate have been favorable. If anyone's bought a new place in the past 5 years, it's been favorable. So we've been happy about that. We plan to be here for a long time. But yeah, I mean, no regrets. Definitely learnings and hardship, mostly with the sheep. But I got to tell you, once I decided to, I attached so much of my identity to, like, I raise Dorper, I raise full blood Dorper, I breed them. That's my thing. Once I let go of that and realized, you know what? What's the why behind this? There really wasn't a good why.
Yeah.
And the reason for my interest is homesteading is like, I have a lot of issues with big agriculture and big food, and I wanted a place where I could grow food for my family. And there are a lot of ways to do that other than raising Dorper sheep. There's actually dozens of other sheep breeds that will do just fine out here. There's also other animals besides sheep. And since then, we've done chickens and pigs. We have done goats. About the only things we've done rabbits. A lot of garden. We've done bees. The only things we really haven't done are cows. And then turkeys are basically it. So there's a
And
lot of ways to feed your family.
yeah, and you bring up two great points, okay? Because we all, if you're regenerative ag, and just like people that home birth, we've home birthed in the past, you like to
Wow.
you like to be all super puritanical and I will never, I will never do this and I'll
Yep.
never do that.
Yep.
And if my animals get worms, I'll feed them black walnut husks, and there
Yep.
is there's a natural way to do this. And in the grand, larger picture, I would say absolutely. But there's this puritanical absolutist utopia, right? That we all like to live in. And then there's reality. And let's say you have $10,000 worth of sheep, right? And they all start croaking in front of you, and then you're like, wait a minute, and Will Harris talked about this from White Oak Pastures about
Yeah.
he used to immunize his cows for certain things, and he still does for blackleg, and he even said he's like, I probably now that I've grown these genetics out, I probably don't have to do it, but I think they do it a little bit out of paranoia and whatnot. And that's just, I mean, what's that from? That's from experience, because we have this
Yes.
puritanical utopian idea of this is the way I'm going to do it. And, this is the way that they say to do it in all these books. And there's a lot of these, and this fly is going to keep this always happens to me, man. I feel like this fly is going to keep landing on me. And there's like one fly in here. But there's this, because that's the other thing about a lot of these YouTube channels is they're very curated. They're gonna use filters, and they're gonna show you all the cool stuff. And
Yeah.
for clickbait, they'll tell you when something kind of goes bad. But overall, like in the overarching picture, it's kind of like, oh, this is cool and easy and trendy and all this stuff, right? And this is the way everything should be. And they won't even be
Yes.
honest. Like if they are
Yes.
worming their animals, they won't be honest about it. No,
Yeah.
of course not. If you properly rotationally graze and you're bringing in complementary animals behind them, these worms cannot populate. They'll never be in the
Right.
soil, all this stuff, right? But then there's the reality, right? There's the ideal and the reality, just like with home birthing. If we had our choice, oh yeah, I would only ever exclusively home birth, but
Sure.
sometimes there's complications, sometimes stuff happens, and that intervention is not the worst thing in the world. Just like with wormer, I mean, would we prefer to not ever worm? Of course. Will we implement and do whatever we can to not have to do that? Of course. If we have to do it, because some people are so tied to an ideal, they just be like, well, I mean, if I ever have to do that, I could never say that I believe in regenerative agriculture, permaculture, or whatever. It's just like this puritanical high ground, and they're putting themselves in a box, one that they can't live in, and two that they can't get out of.
Yes. Yeah.
And the second thing that you mentioned was great, was like tying your identity to this particular breed of sheep, because we started raising Longhorn, and we loved our Longhorn, and Longhorn are just incredible animals that literally they can literally survive anything. Like they could survive, our cow mentor, what does he say? They could survive on cactus and barbed wire, right? And they really can. They really can. And we had, I think at one time we had over 20 some cows or whatever.
Okay.
And when we got into this carnivore thing, we're like, you know what? We really need to up our fat game, and Longhorn are so lean. And, we had beautiful cows with papers from great bloodlines and everything. But, like, well, if we're going to keep doing this thing, if we're going to raise our cows for meat, we started offering, a lot of our grass fed to our local customers and everything. And that was great. And we were even networking with other farmers, with other ranchers with different breeds that were grass fed. So, and what we found is like our Longhorn they're just too lean,
Mhm.
we need to continue to develop and look at breeds, so now we're in the same process of we're flipping our herd over. We got a great low line Hereford bull, and then we have a
Mm.
Angus bull. But right now we have some low line Angus, and we're just kind of feeling it out, this whole process of converting over to a cow that has a better fat ratio, and then a better conversion ratio as far as like gross body weight to total meat production. And
Right.
these are all the different things that you learn. Not, I mean, probably you could learn all this stuff if you watch enough videos and read a book. There's so much value in just doing it,
Just doing
Uh,
it. And
yeah,
you have a mentor with you. And that is another big like secret sauce.
yeah. And I just give you so much props, right? You're like all the way on the other side of the country, and maybe kind of, because see, a lot of people are stuck in this kind of conundrum, right? Like, oh, is it too late? Did I already miss the boat? What
Right.
should I do? And they either get stuck in analysis paralysis, or they're just like, I blew it. I should have moved 10 years ago when you all moved and all this stuff, right? And they just stay
Yeah.
stuck where they're at. I mean, we moved in 14, you moved in 21. I mean, there's a large gap there.
Yeah.
You don't regret moving. You just did it. Maybe tell us a little bit about that whole process of, you got the remote job offer and you're like, let's just do it. We're just going to we're going to move to a house that we've never seen, to a place we've never been. And maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, my family, my wife and I, a couple of years ago decided, just like a business, what are our core values? What are the guiding principles for our marriage and how we parent our children and how we live out our dreams? And adventure is one of those. That was a core value that my wife really brought up. Is like, we're a family that takes on adventure. And so when you really put, pen to paper and make it known that these are what we stand for, it becomes very easy to like live something like that out. I think there's so many ways to homestead besides doing it the route that we have done. And there are a lot of steps to take. I remember when I lived in a townhome, the first home my wife and I, bought, we had a yard that was smaller than the room that I am currently in, my home office. And we we made an herb garden and we dried our own herbs, and like for a couple weeks in the fall, like we've got the sticks and the string with the herbs falling,
Mhm.
like it looked like an apothecary in our kitchen. And there's a lot of there's a lot you can do with a little bit of space. And so the reality is, if you think you can't, I would just challenge that a little bit and say, see if you even have a taste for it. Because, and you brought this up, and I'm so glad you did, is like on Instagram, especially YouTube also, but there's a lot of these just sunshine and rainbows homesteads where you've got people who don't do the work,
Yeah.
or they've hired out the help, which, like, I don't mind. If you hire out if you're a farm, you're a business, you got to hire out the help, that's okay. But don't sell it as if this is a
Right.
set it and forget it type of thing. I
Exactly.
think that's I think
Exactly.
that's unfortunate, because I think that leads to a lot of like unnecessary stress for people that are jumping into it,
Yeah.
because they think it's easy, because it's
It's
not. There's a
misrepresented. It's a misrepresentation of what reality is.
uh-huh, uh-huh. Um, Yeah, absolutely. It's misrepresented and it's unfortunate. And I think that a lot of people think that you have to do everything to homestead. And I would disagree with that. I think that another thing I would go back and tell my old self is, engage in one enterprise every year, one new enterprise, nail it and then scale it. So, sheep, great. Next year, laying chickens, great. Next year, your vegetable garden, great. And maybe some people with more time or dedication could do two in the year, one in the spring and one in the fall, kind of a thing. Get your spring garden ready and then finish out some meat chickens in the fall. I don't know. But when you try to do multiple things at once, you're just not going to have the experience to do it well. I did that last year with bees. I just thought, oh yeah, like, I got a flow hive. I'll throw the bees in there. I'll buy a nuke and da da da. And hey, in springtime, I was a great beekeeper. I was really good at keeping bees in the springtime when
Mhm.
the nectar flow is strong. Um, and summertime, they pieced out, because I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. And
Right.
that's just one example of like, and that's just bees like that, like a nuke. I don't know what it cost me, less than $200. It was a bummer, a fun learning experience. I got stung a handful of times. Hooray! But if you're doing that with something big like a pig or sheep or cows, that's a
Mhm.
real bummer if you can't, if you put in all that time and energy, plus that's an animal's life, like, you really owe it to yourself to go a little bit slower. And I just worry that there's too much out there that shows that it's just sunshine and rainbows and easy. And the hardest thing you do is, putting the meat in your freezer or picking all the tomatoes. Like, that's the hardest thing. And
Right.
it's
Yeah.
not. There's a lot more work to put up the food than there is just harvesting it.
Yeah, and I think the way that y'all went about it, you started out, learning the skills when you're in your townhome, doing the things. Then you went to a slightly larger property, and you had sheep on an acre and a half or what have you. And then y'all are like, wow, we actually like doing this. This is like, and that's why I got a great friend, the permaculture consultant, and he's putting together a homestead permaculture workshop site where people can go there, live there, interact, and even see if they even like, because
Ah,
yeah, because what we noticed, during the whole pandemic thing, we had this rural exodus where all the city dwellers wanted to escape to the rural, and we've seen properties come cleared, partially developed, and we know of dozens of people, and they move out and they do it, and then they're like, oh, I kind of missed the cul-de-sac, and then they sell, they're gone, and I mean, I could list like dozens of properties we know of like that.
mm,
And so taking it bite-sized pieces at a time, a lot of this and we are in interesting times, and there's lots of interesting world events happening daily, and the the script is being flipped often, um but when you allow fear to be your motivating factor, that's why, like, well, I have to buy as much land as possible, and we have to grow all of our food, which, you know when people start even saying that they're like, they grow all their own food, and now I do believe that there are some people that do that. I believe that it's a very small handful of people,
mhm,
and um and the people that say that and that do that, yeah, I'm not taking anything away from them, but that is incredibly difficult, incredibly challenging, incredibly time consuming, um and it's not a reality for 99% of everybody, and in a way you shouldn't want it to be, because I think you were alluding to this fact of community and
yes,
developing a skill, right, that's marketable, that's scalable, that's practical, and if you can do that, you don't have to be good at everything. Like, oh, I can graze out a grass-fed cow, I can get the best conversion ratio, and also grow the most tomatoes and cucumbers, and I can them. Like, if you're really good at a couple of things, and you now have a value that you can bring to your local community and your local marketplace, you don't have to be great at everything, and you don't have to do everything, where you can
yes,
just focus and be more of an expert in certain areas and bring that value to your community. And you
yes,
should want, I mean, as much as we do want to be self-reliant, it's, to me, it's more about parallel community, parallel society, and networking, building and growing together. And because everybody's doing it at a different pace, and
mhm,
everybody kind of sees the reality at different times. Like, I was a financial planner for 11 years, and I remember the '08 housing crash and all these different things. And when we decided to leave our incredibly densely populated area, I'm just like, I don't know how many years we have, maybe 3 or 4. You know what I mean? But like within 3 or 4 years, with all this money printing and with all these artificial bubbles and quantitative easing, and I've just expected this shoe to drop, and here we are. In 2 days we're going to celebrate our 10th year anniversary here in Texas, right? And guess what? It didn't. And this is the grace of God. Like, that's the weird part that people don't take away from this. Like, it's I it's unexplainable to me from every fundamental metric, financial metric, of how the entire dog and pony, the shell game, uh, money printing pyramid thing, how that house of cards hasn't fallen, or how they artificially prop it up, or however you want to perceive it. Um, it's fascinating to me that it it is not a Mad Max dystopia yet. And and there's a obviously, from observation, there is a percentage chance that it might not ever be that. It's Jack Spirko says if times get tough or even if they don't, and that philosophy makes a lot of sense. Be prepared. And you know what? If it doesn't go Mad Max like Thunderdome, you're still prepared. You're still helping,
Yeah.
you're still loving your neighbor, you're still helping your neighbor. You now have these real world skills, these non-synthetic artisan skills. Maybe your neighbor has developed different old world skills. I definitely think a solution to what is happening to America is a slower, um, non-hyper consumerist, right? Because that was the big thing. I read the book, The Millionaire Next Door, right? And
Yeah.
the
Good
book
one.
is about hyper consumerism, right? And that's what's destroying society, culture. It's what's decoupled capitalism. There's no real capitalism on certainly on a national or transnational scale. It's exclusively not capitalism. We can still function as capitalists per se, but that system has been communized. I don't want to go on any rants, but so much of what you're saying, it's such great tips, because, and the reason I love interviewing folks that have this draw to homesteading and then they launch out and they
Mhm.
actually do it, right? You are like, well, you're the example. Like, well, we did it. We sold our house in the neighborhood. We moved all the way across the country. Y'all have kids, right?
We do. Yep.
How many kids y'all got?
We have 2 kids. One is 8 years old and one's 4.
Oh, wow, that's cool. Do you have a pink
Yeah.
one and a blue one, or what you got?
Yeah, that's right. Yep. In that
Yeah,
order.
that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool.
Well, that's something, you brought up all of these skills that homesteading, whether, things go down the drain or they don't. The homesteading is still valuable. And that's something as a parent, I've really tried with my kids. Because one thing I'm trying to walk the line very much is I don't want to see burnout in my kids on homestead. I don't want them to dread doing chores on there because truthfully they didn't choose this life and I don't believe anyone has to do this. Like I'm not the kind of homesteader that says like, "Oh, if you live in a suburb, like you're an idiot. You don't know what you're doing." No. Like I am grateful for people who appreciate natural food, where it comes from, all that, prefer to know their farmer. That's what farmers markets are for. You know what I mean? Like there
Yeah,
is a really valuable place on the chessboard of life for the people that don't want to homestead but still have these values. There's a place for that. You don't need to move out into the country to be part of this community. And I remember one time we were in Utah, dude. In Utah, on our 1 acre, we had, I think we gave our ram away, but we had like I think we had 5 ewes, their lambs, so that's like another like 5 or 6 lambs. We had 2 or 3 breeding pairs of rabbits. We had 30 laying chickens. We were doing a whole back to Eden. We front yard. We put wood chips over our entire front yard.
Jim
We
Kowalski, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we were doing uh lots of anyway, we're going nuts there just because I had this like crazy mindset that like every square inch has to be put to use here. And I remember one night, in between dinner and bedtime, my daughter, who must have been about 3 or 4, we were walking doing the chicken chores, just making sure the chickens all went back to sleep and whatever, and we were just over our heads and chores every night. And she looked at me and she said, "Dad, do you ever feel like you were born into the wrong family?" I was like, "Whoa, this is a serious talk from 3 or 4 year old." And so I heard her out, and I said,
That's heavy.
"Yeah, yeah." And I said, "Well, tell me more about that." And she said, "I just don't think I was supposed to be born into a farming family." And at that moment, I was like, "I got to make a change." And when I dug deeper, I said, "What kind of family do you?" And she's like, "I don't know, like a family that makes ice cream, like maybe an ice cream family." Um, and so we made a tradition that week that every week we had an ice cream cookbook and we just worked our way through that cookbook and every week we made a new flavor. So
That's
we
great.
we got back into that world for her, but it also hit me hard of like I can't I can't do this to my kids. I cannot treat them like, unwilling labor on the homestead. And so we try really hard to walk that line of like, enjoy this and see the value in it. But at no point in time are we hoping that you take over our farm, that like your manifest destiny is for you to decide. I would hope it and love it if you took the values of regenerative agriculture, knowing where your food comes from. All of those things are great, but the expectation isn't that you have to do this. And I think that's a very important distinction. And I see a lot of people who just kind of ride the line very hard. And we try not to be that. We realize that this life isn't for everyone. And there's room in this community, even if you're not homesteading in the conventional sense.
Well, yeah, and that's what actually creates more value for the homesteaders. And this is what speaks to more of like developing skills over time and taking on areas that you enjoy and you're good at. Like, I'd never grown anything in my life, and we moved to Texas. We were in this little farmhouse rental property, and this sweet neighbor, elderly lady, she picked this entire flat of figs. I'd never had a fresh fig in my entire life.
Whew, it's a treat.
And yeah, and she brought this box of freshly picked figs over, and I managed to eat, I don't know, maybe a couple hundred or something. I don't know. It was bad. It was like, and I'm like, this is the most incredible thing I've
Right,
ever tasted in my life. And so I got bit. I got the bug, and I'm like, oh, well, I need a fig tree or
right.
two or three or 100, and I think I'm at 140, and I got
Wow.
140 different variety now, and I just started doing this fruit tree thing, and I'm like, I
Cool.
enjoy this. Um, I'm learning, I'm getting better at it, and then we're developing different ways to monetize that and to
Cool.
share it and different things. And that's all part of specialization, and part of this specialization, I don't mean it in a Prussian government school way where you need to be the specialized cog in the machine, because I think that's something that's happened to American culture, is that the government schools have created this like, what are you good at, and oh, you should be an accountant, or
Yes.
you need to be this one thing,
Yep.
versus you know the founding fathers, they were polymaths, right? They were they had multiple skill sets, and they could do all these different things well. And I think our society has lost that a little bit, and I think that's what this slower, intentional lifestyle brings back. Just like you were saying, you don't want to force your kids into it, but you know what you're doing, you're giving them exposure to it, where if they were in a neighborhood, they wouldn't have exposure to it, and that's the value of it, is like, hey, look, here's nobody's saying that you have to do this, but here you can see what it's like. You know what I
Yep.
mean? You can help out, and we can work together. And there's so much really neat value there. But yeah, I really appreciate your approach and your insight. And it's great to hear that you guys are having success there. Try, fail, adjust, try, fail,
Yes.
adjust. um maybe we could venture into this whole thing. The reason I reached out to you, so here you are, you're like this regenerative agriculture guy. You're probably a self-proclaimed, you're kind of crunchy, you're organic, right? You're like, you're you're
Yeah.
you're trying to eat for health instead of uh living to eat. You're eating to live, and you're aware of, you want to know where your food come from. You appreciate that. You understand that not knowing that leads to disease and different things,
Yeah.
right? And so probably, and the reason I wanted to interview about this, because this is our story when it comes to food. Because I mean, the main reason we started growing our own food and wanting to learn that is because it is important. We want to know what is sprayed or isn't sprayed on our food. We want to know what's in the dirt, and if we put it there, we'll know all that stuff, right?
Yes.
And so we were doing that, and it was just like, yeah, but I still don't feel good. Like, we're
Yeah.
doing all the things, right?
Yep.
we're reading all the books. Look, we're watching all the YouTube people that are doing all these things. And I love Joel Salatin and Will Harris and Gabe Brown and all these
Yep.
awesome mentors and giants. Like I take nothing away from these guys. And now we're gluten free. We used to have an A2 cow. Like we're gluten
Okay,
free.
cool.
We're dairy free, and we're eating whole foods and all this stuff. And I still can't sleep. I have insane arthritis. I
Yeah.
feel like I'm 100 years old. Like, what is
Yeah.
up? Does just getting old suck? Or so maybe you could tell us a little bit of like, how did you one? Okay, where did you ever hear of carnivore? How did you get introduced to it, and why? Why
Yeah.
carnivore?
Well, very similar. So going way back in my story of health, and really um until my first kid, I was always overweight and just bought into the whole genetics thing of like, well, it's just
Mm-hmm.
genetics.
I'm chunky. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And because, when I'd go out with my buds and we'd eat fast food and they were fit and I wasn't, I just figured it was genetics. No, it's because they ate fat. That's the one time that week they ate fast food and they're on the baseball team and they're running track. Whereas me, like I'm playing video games, and when I'm not eating fast food with them, I'm eating fast food on my own or maybe with my family or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I had bought into the whole genetics thing, right? And around the time my first was born, so this would have been just over 8 years ago, my wife and I decided, let's like we got to figure this out, like for the sake of our kids. And I saw marginal success. We bought, like, I was doing P90X at home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Started running, cleaned up diet. Never went as far as to like count calories, but the thing is like even if you know nothing, which I didn't know anything back then, even if you know nothing, you know what's wrong with food. Like, you know what to avoid, you know what to eat. Like, even if,
Yep.
and I'm not a fan of like rice anymore, but even if you're just eating like white rice and chicken, which is a conventionally like healthy meal, like
Mm-hmm.
you probably, unless you're like smothering that in a lot of fats, like you're probably not going to overeat calories wise. Maybe you're not getting a lot of the nutrients that you need from that. But and so we saw marginal increases in that. My dad had been a runner for a long time, and he wanted to run an ultra marathon, which is anything longer than a marathon. So he had committed to
Wow.
a
Cool. That's
50K.
hardcore. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I had been going through this journey and said this will keep me motivated to run. It'd be something to do for my dad. We ran a few halves together. We ran a marathon together, and after a few years of training, we ran an ultra marathon together. And during that training, I had read, there's a really great book, Born to Run. I love the book, but I've actually gone back on that mindset. I don't, and the reason I go into this is because during this like chronic cardio training, I I was going through this thing of like, what the heck? Why do I feel dead all the time? Why are my feet aching?
Mhm.
Why am my back hurt?
Mhm.
Why can't I sleep? I'm working my butt off. I'm not losing weight. I'm still overweight. I'm running. Like some months I was putting in 90 or 100 miles a month. Like I couldn't figure it out. And so a friend of mine, actually, a company I worked at, my boss saw that I was running a lot, and he bought me a book by an author named Mark Sisson, who's big in the primal movements. He's got some great books. My favorite of his is The Primal Blueprint. And when I finally stumbled on that, it in the first 10 pages shook my world and said, "Hey, you know what conventional wisdom says about the food pyramid and all, like genetics, and then like you could rewrite, not like he says you can rewrite your genetics. Well, you can't do that. You can express through your genes a different pathway,
Right.
basically."
Yeah.
Um, and I fell in love with that because it was hope, right? And I learned about fat, and that fat isn't bad, and that meat,
Mhm.
especially red meat, isn't bad. Um, and I went hard to the paint on that. I discovered intermittent fasting and stuff, and started feeling much better. So that was probably my first big shift, but it was a double-edged sword because I also was eating so many vegetables in that diet. I was eating
Mm.
like I had cut refined carbs, so like bread, soda, white sugar. It was all in the past, but like my lunches, my typical lunches at work, I'd have like a little, glass Tupperware dish of like a couple of hard-boiled eggs, which are great, and then a bed of spinach, just raw
Mhm.
spinach.
Yeah, yeah.
And my dessert was like an apple and almond butter, and I was eating nut like macadamia nuts, and these are all things that on the paleo diet are like, yeah, as much as you can eat, like that's.
Mhm.
And I just start like I started having like stomach problems. And I had a doctor who's luckily very like paleo focused. I had found he's a functional doctor, and then but an MD, and he's a good doctor. And when I discussed this with him, he's like, "You probably have SIBO, small intestine bacteria overgrowth,
Yeah.
and eating these healthy things is actually overfeeding the bad gut. That's why you're bloated. That's why you have to run to the bathroom the second you wake up. That's why you can't eat an apple without running to the bathroom. Like you, you have an overgrowth of bacteria." And as I started studying a lot more about the gut and stuff, it's like, dude, so this is fascinating. So like we have, two, two ways to examine the gut. You can go up or you can go down, right? um, what
Fun.
is it, like an endoscopy or a colonoscopy or whatever,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So in both those scenarios, they can go 5 feet up or 5 feet down.
Mm.
You have 30 feet between like your mouth and the other end of tubing. Um, and the small intestine is about 20 feet in you. So the small intestine, if you do the math, you're going 5 feet up or 5 feet down, and the small intestine is 20 feet, and it's in the middle of that. Guess what we
You
can't check.
Yeah, yeah.
And so looking into that was like, dude, and the small intestine is where all the magic happens. I mean, when we talk
Mhm.
about gut health, like that's where it is, baby. And we can't test it. I mean, there's a lot of different ways, a lot of like breath and stuff, but like stool, for example, like stool test, that's not your small intestine.
Right.
That because stool would be the last stop, and the small intestine's not the last stop. Anyway, I'm giving you more than maybe what you're looking for, but it opened my eyes to like, okay, so even that, paleo, healthy, keto mindset of eating green, I'm basically eating greens and meat and maybe some nuts, and it was still jacking me up.
Mhm.
And I was just on that road for a long time. Um, and then I moved out here, started eating basically what, like this summer, I ate most every day what I grew. Now, granted, like I don't have salt. I'm buying salt and seasoning from the store, but even my fat, like is usually like lard, usually from the pigs, like everything. Like my favorite dish was like, pork chop and okra from the garden. Like, whew, good dinners. And all grown on my own farm. And still, like I was having aches and pains. I was getting hurt in the gym all the time,
Mm.
digestive issues, like always constipated. Like I just couldn't figure it out. And I had heard about carnivore a long time ago. I think a lot of people heard about it through Joe Rogan, at least
Sure. Yeah,
initially.
sure.
And I had a long time ago, and just never really gave it an honest try. And honestly, it was just such a bad bout of constipation that was just pushed me to the edge. It's like I've tried what the conventional narrative is. I've cut out dairy. I am, pounding berries. I am taking fiber supplements. Like it, no dice. And after
Mm.
about 10 days in carnivore, it was like I had a whole new like tubing system. It was, and man, like, and uh like I've had a lot of other inflammatory related issues. Back pain gone away, plantar fasciitis, which I got from running a lot, went away. I did lose some weight. I was putting on new PRs at the gym. I have seen a therapist for years, and about 60 days into that, it was like, I don't really have much to talk about in therapy anymore. And so I love my therapist. She's excellent and a really great professional, but it just got to the point where it's like, I don't think I need to be here anymore.
Mm. Wow.
Just a lot of stuff that just really came together. And my wife was gracious enough. She did the 100 days with me. Um, and once the 100 days were up, it was during the holidays and my mom was in town. And part of the reason why I was so overweight, my mom was like a baker. Like she made
Uh-huh.
like
Yeah.
we just always had cakes and everything in the house growing up, and like it was very common for breakfast growing up to just have like cake, just like cold cake for breakfast. Like
Yeah.
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 So no wonder why. And I was blaming it on genetics growing up.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and so I just a couple days, like mostly just to satisfy mom, who flew out here with like a cooler of cakes, because that's what moms do. um and I and I think a lot of people who do carnivore would hope that I would say like, oh, I felt terrible and I almost died, and it's like I didn't feel great, there was a change, but like I was just happier on carnivore, so immediately I just went back to it. Just back to having mostly steaks, a lot of eggs, a lot of my own products. And but now I'm to the point where it's like, my just the other day, like my kid wanted a mango at the store. We bought him a mango, like all 4-year-olds. He didn't finish it.
Of
And
course.
I finished it for him. I wasn't bloated. I didn't feel sick. Like, would I go out and buy it for myself? Probably not. But I'm okay with that. So like, a lot of carnivores will look at that and say like, "Oh, you're not carnivore. You're just like everyone else."
Mhm, mhm.
And like whatever, like I'm over the label of it now, but it's like, I mean, I'm animal based 95% of my calories. And you're a parent, and so I mean, maybe your kids are out of this stage, but my kids never, finish things, and I hate wasting food. So
Never.
like,
I still don't.
yeah,
No.
yeah,
We'll never
yeah. I
be
mean,
out
there
of
are certain things. Yeah. I mean, there's certain things I'm happy to like give to the chickens, but like, if it's something like a fruit, yeah, I'll clean it up. Because at the end of the day, like I don't like that the carnivore diet is like, oh, like fruit's bad. Like don't eat fruit.
Sure.
It's like it's on a scale, right? Like
Right.
yeah, don't like grapes and watermelon, maybe don't live off of those. But if you think about the primal origins of berries, like a berry's dream is to get eaten by a bird and flown half a mile away and dropped out and turned into another berry plant. Like
Yeah.
the phytotoxins in berries are a lot less than they are in, say, like a leafy green or a brassica
Sure.
like broccoli. Like, and I just don't, I'm just not on the train. And like I did 100 days strict and I felt great. And now I'm to the point where it's like, yeah, honestly, like 5 days a week is no different than what it was before. Just because I feel great on that, but I don't slap myself on the wrist if you know what I mean. Like
Sure.
it's just knowledge. It's just
Well, and
knowledge, knowing
it's got to be sustainable.
that's
And
it.
it shouldn't be predicated, it's annoying that they want to take this historic, or well, let me say prehistoric. They want to take
Mhm,
this prehistoric approach that, Neanderthal man and blah blah blah, because they want to like black backsplain it, like they want
mhm,
to like give us this historical reference, which there is an inordinate amount. We know of these different people and tribes that eat much more animal based or whatever. But we clearly know that people did eat different types of plants, and obviously fruits are desirable because they're naturally sweet. I
yep,
certainly do not think that plants per se are trying to kill us. My personal opinion is, with all of the pollution, whether it's commercial pollution or whether it's high atmospheric aerosolized injections or what have you, this is corrupting these different foods, even if you're growing them yourself. And I have
mhm,
400 fruit trees, and I will absolutely eat fruit in season. But,
great.
these, our soil is polluted, our sky is polluted, and these plants are taking in this stuff. You're ingesting it. And if you do it in large enough volumes, and then when your body is completely out of whack and not functioning properly, uh, it's not going to behave the way it should. So, that it, I think it's so neat when people that overall, from what we're 230 days in, we continue to see more and more people. We've been we've had another YouTube friend, Darcy Isabella, and she just posted a video, and they just did like 30 or 60 days carnivore, and they're experiencing all these health benefits. And it's so neat to offer someone a modality that's simple, it's duplicatable, it's incredibly non-complicated.
Yeah.
In America, it's incredibly easy to access. There's no barriers to access. And within 2 weeks, like, you're going to notice demonstrable improvement. And those positive results are what are going to keep you on this food journey, trying to figure out what does make me feel good and what does make me not feel good, and this is a tool in your tool belt that it doesn't have to be like this puritanical, oh, well, you ate a part of a mango, you're obviously not a
Right.
carnivore,
Right.
or your ancestral DNA doesn't want you eating that mango, see, so you're poisoning yourself and all this stuff. It's hyperbolic. I appreciate some of the guys that say that kind of stuff, but you know I also appreciate a very um a very broad look, and not trying to over explain or come up with why. Like, it's so funny. You go carnivore, oh, are you gonna eat like that for the rest of your life? And I'm like, dude, like, listen, dude, we live in America. We live in a microwave society, a microwave culture. Nobody, unfortunately, 99% of everyone, nobody puts that much thought into what they're going to eat tomorrow, let alone for the rest of their life, dude. So to
Yeah,
relax,
so
you
true.
know, and don't, and it, what's interesting? Because man, I don't know about you, at my work, like, there's so many guys with all these bowel issues, man, just like what you're talking about, right? So I mean, it's so pervasive. I would bet you, I know it's over 50%. I would bet you it's probably like 80%, right? And I think people are so addicted to food, right?
Mm,
And I think their real thing is I think some people are afraid that it will work and they'll feel better. And they're
yep.
like, but the problem is if I do that and I cut out all that stuff and it works, like, I won't be
I think
able
you're
to
right.
go back to my trans fats. And you know what I mean? I think that's part of the barrier of people trying it, is because they're so addicted to these foods and it's subconscious, and they don't even want to consider the notion that, yeah, I'm going to try that and see if I feel better.
Yeah. Yeah. Something that you brought up is really, that is the hardest part of this diet for me. And I forget that I said diet. That is the hardest part of this, because I hate, oh, it's a
Sure.
diet because that, yeah. But like that's the hardest part is, like, and I wouldn't even tell people like you have to do it. Everyone should be doing it. But when I hear people that struggle with things like weight loss, pre-diabetes, ulcerative colitis, like depression, even,
Mm-hmm.
and I just say, hey, look, I'm not your doctor, but as a friend, this has been really, really cool for me.
Yeah.
And like, and I try to just float it by them. And I usually get like, wow, I'm so happy it worked for you. I could just never do it.
Yeah.
And it is like, it's sad to see people that are just addicted to a fixed mindset of not being willing to try something. It's someone who has, I don't probe for this. People who say like, oh yeah, I got a pre-diabetic diagnosis recently, and it's like, hey, I have an idea, and it's just like, no, I don't want to do that. It's like, dude, this is your life we're talking about. It's not more money.
Yeah.
It's a heck of a less like dinner prep, especially like if you've got your whole house on board, or if you don't have children that you need to prepare separate meals for. Like, it's pretty darn easy. And so it's just sad and hard and frustrating, and it's gotten to the point where it's honestly kind of discouraging to talk about it sometimes, because you just know. I've got a friend who I hadn't talked to in a long time. We started texting and just, hey, how's it going? And his life has not been doing well. He's had a divorce, and he told me he had a psychotic breakdown and was hospitalized
Mm.
for a few days for mental illness. And I one of those things where it's like, I don't lead with the carnivore diet in those
Sure.
situations. I say, how let's talk for a little bit. And then, but when it's appropriate, I just say, hey, I'm not trying to be prescriptive in this, but on the mental health side, I have seen so much benefit from this. And I'm not you. I haven't had the same issues as you. I'm not going through divorce like you just have. However, I've seen a lot of stuff with this. He's like, ah, that just sounds too hard. I don't think I could do it. And
Hmm.
it's like, what do you have to lose? Like, even at rock bottom, I know people who won't do it. And so I would say, in all honesty, when people ask, what's the hardest thing about that diet? That is the hardest thing about this is talking to people, knowing the good that it could do, and just seeing people who don't even want to try it, not even for 7 days.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's really sad, especially with just being able to have so many. I mean, within 2 weeks. I mean, I've never done anything in this whole process of trying to figure out what we should and shouldn't eat. I've never done anything that within 2 weeks to just have such uh
Yes.
dramatically improved sleep, dramatically improved joints. Um, I was never ever overweight, and to still lose visceral fat just by without exercise. And I used to be like a super hardcore. I used to be very enjoyed working out daily, 6 days a week, and different things. And
Mhm.
to just have all these like almost passive benefits,
Yeah.
and to, no longer be hypoglycemic, all these different things. And, this is what's going to give you a longer life. And you're going to end it. I wasn't on any meds, but to be not half, I mean, pre diabetic people, I don't understand that with this type 2, it can be completely reversed. Everybody that I've seen
Yes.
go carnivore and be consistent with it has completely reversed diabetes. And I mean, I mean, a lot of heart disease and all these other metabolic diseases are directly tied to this processed sugar thing. And to be able to reverse all that, and for something that's so non-complicated, you don't have to like take your blood sugar, you don't have to track your macros, you don't have to do any of this stuff. This is so simplistic.
Yep.
And yeah, it's fascinating. Well, this has been the conversation that I thought it would be. This has been excellent. Lots of great information, lots of excellent tips, lots of encouragement. PJ, where can folks find and follow you?
Thank you. Yeah, it's been an amazing conversation. I love the mindset of, really, the theme just seems like trying to do your best, but realizing that the like concessions or reality is a thing. I just Great mindset today. I'm on YouTube only right now. Homesteading with PJ is that. So we're talking about a lot of homesteading stuff. It's really that connection of where um, health and food and working the land kind of all meets. It's really just about stewardship, whether that's your land or your own health.
Yeah, that is great. And, before we wrap up, do you have any parting words for the listeners?
I would say, and it's something that you brought up, because you brought up your fruit trees, and I love, the eating seasonally is such a powerful thing. And hey, I would just say, that's the great thing about farmers markets. If most of your food is coming locally, it's very easy to eat seasonally. And we're coming out of winter right now. Um, what's seasonal in winter is meat. So even the folks that aren't going to do carnivore for life, if you are of the mindset of, hey, I want to eat seasonally, that's a really good easy plug for carnivore. It's just a few months out of the year, depending on what your winter looks like. But yeah, eating locally, eating seasonally is always a great thing. And if that lets a few people into the carnivore door, I think that's a good thing.
Well, that is great. Hey, y'all, this is a value for value proposition. So if you do love and enjoy the type of content and the guests that we bring you, please go over to TheTexasBoys.com. And speaking of fruit trees, we still have the Food Forest in a box available. Or if you're looking for raw, unpasteurized honey, maybe coffee, teas, whatever you need, check us out over there. This supports the channel and it gives us the opportunity to continue to bring you great and exciting content. PJ, thank you so very much for your time. This has been awesome.
Thank you very much. I had a blast.
All right, y'all. Remember, stay fearless, my friends.